What happens when the people sworn to protect and serve make mistakes so catastrophic that they shatter a high-profile investigation? Welcome back, everyone, to another video. Today, we are going to dive deep into an investigation that has completely shaken the public, media, and law enforcement. This isn't just a story about a missing person. It is a story about the staggering mistakes that can completely derail a high-profile case. I am talking about the Nancy Guthrie case. As you all know, for the past 6 months, I've been right there covering this story every single day. I've been on the ground, standing outside the crime scene, and bringing every single detail straight to you through my sources and my camera. But today's episode is going to be quite different because we are going to look at everything from a completely new angle. Today, we're talking about what's happening beneath the surface, where police politics, internal feuds, and staggering negligence have turned this case into a tangled maze that seems almost impossible to escape. Please watch this video carefully, because the revelations I am about to make will force you to think about how our law enforcement system truly operates. Let's start with that explosive and shocking report from the Wall Street Journal that completely altered the trajectory of this investigation. Look, when a crime happens, especially an abduction or kidnapping, the first 48 hours are the most precious. These initial hours are known in investigative terms as the golden hours. If correct decisions aren't made during this window, a case can turn cold forever. In the Nancy Guthrie case, when the Pima County Sheriff's Department arrived at the crime scene that very first morning, they made decisions that would shock any ordinary person. The biggest and most disastrous mistake was that they completely ignored the blood present at the scene. Yes, you heard that right. When police arrived, they found blood on the front door and porch area. But instead of sounding an immediate red alert and treating it as a violent crime, they concocted a theory that made zero sense. They believed that because Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old, suffered from heart issues, used a pacemaker, and was likely taking blood thinners, this blood must be the result of an old injury or a medical emergency. They assumed she might have just wandered off on her own and hurt herself along the way. This single minor and flawed assumption completely destroyed the investigation in its opening days. They treated the case not as a kidnapping, but as a routine missing person report. And what was the consequence of this negligence? The crime scene wasn't properly secured. I was there myself, and I saw with my own eyes how quickly the yellow crime scene tape was taken down. I remember how shocked I was at the time, because in cases like this, a crime scene usually remains sealed for weeks to ensure no evidence is missed. But something else entirely was happening here. It even got to the point where a pizza delivery guy walked right up to the area after the scene was cleared, and no one stopped him. All of this is proof of how lightly the investigation was taken from the very beginning. The Wall Street Journal report shed light on the fact that the person leading the homicide unit at the time lacked experience in handling such complex investigations. In fact, there had been recent turnover in that department, and the unit's head had previously been disciplined in several cases for minimizing evidence. Hearing all this leaves just one question in mind. Was the Pima County Sheriff's Department truly capable of handling a case of this magnitude? Or did their inexperience put the life of a woman who could have been saved in even greater danger? Now, let's take the story a bit further and talk about the person who bore the brunt of this incompetence and negligence. I am talking about Carlos. You might remember that just days after Nancy went missing, a massive raid took place in Rio Rico, near the Mexican border. In the dead of night, the FBI and dozens of Pima County Sheriff's deputies surrounded Carlos's house. It felt as though the case had been solved and they had caught the person responsible for kidnapping Nancy. I arrived at the scene that night and saw Carlos's family, specifically his relative Josefina. She came outside and clearly stated that the police had the wrong person. They didn't have anything, and they had zero connection to this case. At the time, I felt a sense of truth in her words. And today, 6 months later, that truth is proving completely accurate. Carlos's phone was seized, his entire digital history was scrutinized, and even DNA swabs were taken, yet police found not a single piece of evidence against him. He wasn't even in that neighborhood on the night Nancy was abducted. But the most regrettable aspect of this whole matter is that to this day, Sheriff Chris Nanos has never publicly come out and stated that Carlos is innocent. I recently conducted an extended interview with Carlos's lawyer, Jesse Showalter. Jesse stated that this is a blatant injustice against an ordinary citizen. On one hand, you turn an innocent man's life upside down in front of the entire world, casting him as a suspect in the disappearance of a high-profile figure like Nancy Guthrie. And then when you realize you were wrong, your ego stops you from admitting a mistake. Sheriff Nanos dances around questions in interviews, saying things like no one is cleared and anyone can be a suspect again. This attitude shows he is merely trying to cover up his own mistakes and protect his public image. Imagine the immense psychological pressure Carlos must be facing. Having the world view you like a criminal and then refusing to clear your name. Against this irresponsible behavior, Carlos and his lawyer are now preparing to file a massive lawsuit. Their sole objective is to clear Carlos's name from the stigma cast upon him by police haste and error. Why is all of this happening in the first place? What is actually going on inside this department? The answers lie in the internal politics of the Pima County Sheriff's Office. When Nancy Guthrie disappeared, that timing was already exceptionally difficult for Sheriff Nanos. He had just won a recent election by an extremely narrow margin. He had won by a mere couple of hundred votes. What was even worse was that his own force, his own deputies, had issued a vote of no confidence against him. Department morale had plummeted. In an environment where the head of a department is preoccupied with saving his seat and silencing dissenting voices, how can a critical investigation possibly be conducted properly? When leadership lacks focus and internal politics are at their peak, it directly impacts the performance of officers working on the ground. That is why such glaring mistakes happened in the early stages, and when it came time to fix them later on, a blame game began. The friction and tension between federal agencies and local police further complicated this case. In the beginning, news broke out that this would be a joint investigation where the FBI and local police would work hand in hand. FBI Director Kash Patel himself arrived on the scene. He held a press conference, posed for photos, and even went on television to declare that they possessed video footage that would crack the case wide open within 24 to 36 hours. But reality was entirely different. Flight records show that Kash Patel was on the ground for less than 6 hours. He showed up, made a statement for the cameras, and left. From that day to this, the FBI leadership in Washington has hardly made any open statements on the case. Behind-the-scenes reports indicate that the Pima County Sheriff's Department wanted to keep the FBI sidelined from the investigation. Kash Patel later complained that local police barred them from entering the case for the first 4 days. On the other side, Sheriff Nanos claimed he had informed a local deputy on the FBI task force right from the beginning. This was clearly a turf war over jurisdiction and authority, a war in which the only victims were Nancy Guthrie and her family. If the FBI had been allowed to step in from day one with their full capacity and advanced technology to take over the crime scene, accurately analyze the blood traces, and track the digital ransom notes, the outcome of this story might have been entirely different. Instead, the local department's stubborn insistence that this is our case wasted precious time. Behind all this political, legal, and investigative spectacle lies a deeply heartbreaking human story, and that is the pain of Savannah Guthrie and her family. Savannah Guthrie isn't just a TV anchor. She is one of the most beloved and respected personalities in this country. She is a former lawyer herself, having worked for court TV and covered police investigations just like this one closely throughout her career. Imagine what that woman must be going through, smiling in front of the whole world, reading the news to the public, yet knowing deep inside that the law enforcement system she relies on made such severe mistakes in her mother's case. Savannah knows how crime scenes are preserved, how important DNA evidence is, and how crucial initial FBI involvement can be. Yet, she has never publicly uttered a single word criticizing the police or any agency. She handles her messaging with extreme care and discipline. Every public statement she makes is calculated. She talks about rewards and prayers, but she never points fingers at anyone. The reason for this is likely because she knows she has no choice right now except to rely on the police. If she were to come out publicly and express anger, it might disrupt whatever fragile investigation remains. But the video she shared recently revealed the pain in her eyes, the exhaustion on her face, and the quiet agony in her words, clearly showing the nightmare she is living through. Not knowing where your mother is, what condition she's in, or whether she is even alive. That is a torment impossible to fully describe. The mere thought that her own fame or celebrity status might have made her mother a target must weigh heavily on her soul, a haunting sense of guilt even though she bears no fault. If we look at this entire case from a 30,000-foot view, it is no longer just a missing person case. It is a mirror reflecting the systemic flaws of our institutions. When officers' internal politics overshadow their duties, when a flawed early assumption, dismissing blood as an old injury, sabotages all efforts, and when high-ranking officials prioritize their ego and positions over innocent lives, where does an ordinary citizen go for justice? This case teaches us how fragile the initial window of time truly is. If the crime scene had been immediately sealed and the bloodstains properly laboratory tested, if a highly trained senior team had been assigned instead of inexperienced officers, and if they had put turf wars aside to welcome FBI help from day one, the sequence of events would have been entirely different. The initial negligence by the Pima County Sheriff's Department gave the real perpetrators ample opportunity to flee and destroy their tracks. Whoever those criminals were, they meticulously used burner phones, masked their digital footprints, and vanished without leaving a single solid trace. We hope that such mistakes will not be repeated in the future, and that an innocent man like Carlos receives the clean clearance he deserves without having to fight a drawn-out legal battle. This investigation is still ongoing, and there is always a chance a new twist could emerge, a new tip that could restart an engine stalled for 6 months. If you or anyone you know has even the smallest piece of information related to this case, please do not keep it to yourself. You can reach out and submit your tips by calling 1-800-CALL-FBI. One small tip from you could help return peace to a grieving family. I will continue doing my part, trying to get to the bottom of this story through new channels, tips, and sources. I will also be heading to New York and South Carolina very soon to bring you new developments on other high-profile cases like Alec Murdaugh and Brian Koberger. Thank you all so much for taking the time to watch this video, subscribe to my channel, and support honest journalism during such a difficult time. I will see you in the next video, and until then, take very good care of yourselves.